I swear to you now, on your mother's memory, you will not be supplanted.
Big set piece ending to this episode. Quite exciting stuff, both from a team perspective and an individual performer perspective. There's a lot of other things happening in this episode, though. So, Joanna, I'll start with you. What was the most important thing that happened in this episode of House of the Dragon? Because I think that thrilling and important might be different things.
Yeah, so it's like 3/4, King's Landing politicking, and then 1/4 Stepstone, if that, right, is sort of the balance of the episode. So I would say like a handful of conversations that Viserys has are this is a real Viserys Paddy Considine episode,
Yes.
and he was fantastic in it. And I think that is the main focus, which through our conversations about Thrones over the years, listening to you guys talk about it, joining you in conversations, I know that we like the conversations and the dialogue and the rich character stuff a bit more than the dragon spectacle. But I'm wondering if they felt like they needed the dragon spectacle to capture the larger audience here.
Mal, what do you think?
Most important thing in this episode, I'm tempted to say that the most important thing for our guy, Andy Greenwald, is the introduction of Jason Lannister. Because I know how much he loves when we just get a regular old 2022 name in the land of ice and fire.
He loves a random Brian thrown in there with everybody else.
Yeah. And for me personally, I'm sorely tempted to say the highly anticipated introduction of Harwin. Break bones strong.
Yes.
Let's go break that bed frame together, Harwin. But the actual answer, I think,
Can you actually
undeniably-
just what are you talking about? Like, I know who you're talking about. It's Lionel's son, but like, why is that just like a personal fetish of yours, or was that guy actually relevant?
I don't know that I would call it a fetish. I think he's a handsome lad, strapping
Have we
Knight
met
of
him?
the Seven Kingdoms. He was in this
This is
episode.
our intro. This is our
We get
intro
to meet
him.
both Harwin and Lara Strong, both sons of Lionel Strong are in this episode. We had a lot of new characters, Tylan and Jason Lannister. It's great stuff. The actual answer to your question, Chris, we'll find a way to bring up Harwin more later. I assure you.
I promise.
I agree with Joanna's pick, and I would say inside of that, specifically Viserys going out of his way to assure Rhaenyra that he will maintain her as heir, that she will not be supplanted. That is the most consequential moment of the episode.
Yeah, that scene had some real Arrested Development narrator. He didn't vibes to that.
Maybe.
To that scene. Without like skipping ahead or knowing anything about it, I just felt like that was not the punctuation mark at the end of the sentence that Rhaenyra might have thought it was. Joe, I wanted to just, before we get into the episode recap, hit on something you mentioned there, which is the balance of this show between the conversations in rooms that essentially like create policy and create the world that we see versus these huge sort of action set pieces that Game of Thrones as a whole has become known for. And I actually thought what Greg Utanis did this week with getting these folks out of the cold chamber, like sort of palace rooms and out in the world and getting on the hunt, walking around the forest, looking for some stags, having some drinks, like they have like a pop-up restaurant out there. That's great. I love to see the culinary wrinkles that they're throwing. But it was just, this episode felt like it was set in a world and not on a set with a bunch of like sort of palace rooms. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and from like an adaptive point of view, like we've been talking a lot about how Fire and Blood is this sort of like bare bone text. Yeah. And the hunt that we see in this episode is pure show invention. So shout out to the writers as well for coming up with like a big set, like ish set piece for them to put all this politicking in, because the line from the book, as far as I can tell, that's close enough to this is Viserys is a man of peace during these years in King's Landing, and there was an endless round of feasts, balls, and tourneys where mummers, Chris Ryan's favorite word, mummers and singers heralded the birth of a new Targaryen princeling. That's the only line. And so then someone in the writer's room was like, let's do a hunt. Let's do all this. And so, shout out to the writer's room. But I completely agree that I loved this widening of the world. And I too would like marble columns in my tents when I go camping.
Yeah, I thought that the successionization idea here, like where you're like every episode has like a gathering to warrant why all these people are in the same room together was really sharp.
When
The
do
Turn-
you
the
think
Turnhaven
Viserys
episode.
will bring the family onto his yacht? You know?
And which one of these characters will have a toe fungus? Yeah, it's a good question. To hear more from this conversation, follow this podcast on the Ringerverse on Spotify or wherever you get your pods.